Hello, everybody, and welcome into Commodity Culture, where our goal is to make you a better investor in the commodities sector. My name is Jesse Day, and today is December 15th, 2025. Before we jump in, standard disclaimer, nothing here is investment advice. Do your own due diligence. And today's guest is the CEO of First Phosphate, a mineral development and clean tech company dedicated to building and onshoring a vertically integrated mine-to-market lithium iron phosphate battery supply chain for North America. It's John Passalacqua. Great to have you back on the program.
Jesse, good to be here.
Let's kick things off with a bird's eye view on the phosphate market. What are the most important themes and trends investors should be watching when it comes to phosphate as we move into 2026?
Yeah, so Jesse, we're mostly interested in battery grade phosphate. That's purified phosphoric, and that's what goes into the LFP batteries, which is very different than phosphate for fertilizer, which is very much commoditized and 90%, 95% of the phosphate out there. So food grade, battery grade phosphate, purified phosphoric acid, remains pretty tight. There are certain groups out there like Benchmark Minerals predicting that we'll need eightfold the amount of purified phosphoric acid in the West to supply the demand for LFP batteries coming by 2030. So yeah, we're quite bullish on the price of purified phosphoric acid at the moment.
Well, purified phosphoric acid is, of course, most important for the battery sector, as you've outlined there. Could you walk us through how PPA is used in battery tech and how it works with lithium in an LFP battery?
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good question because everyone's now pointing to the great demand for lithium that's coming because battery energy storage. If you look at the lithium ETF, it's up 100% since May. And what they're pointing to is battery energy storage. But if you look, battery energy storage is 100% driven by LFP, lithium iron phosphate. So in order to get to LFP, you need three components: lithium, iron, and phosphate. Lithium we know is out there. The iron we know is scarce, but it is available in iron form of iron powder. But the phosphate is what we really need to be looking out for, right? Because the phosphate, you can't do LFP without the P. And phosphate right now has been, basically just geared towards fertilizer, and it's lower grades that are being mined. But in order to make, the high purity phosphate for LFP battery, you really need the higher grade igneous rock that can produce a lot of purified phosphoric acid. Because right now the purified acid in the world is being produced on the back of fertilizer, where they're taking the cleanest cut of the sedimentary phosphate that's being processed for fertilizer and using that for purified phosphoric acid. And all of that's already going into existing uses, such as carbonated beverages like Coca-Cola, dental paste such as Colgate, food, um, industry, cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, water treatment. And so there's not a lot of that PPA that's available to make LFP battery. So the West needs a whole new source of PPA for the pursuits of LFP battery. So well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that, all the lithium in the world is not going to save us unless we got the phosphate as well.
Well, the US now joins Canada, South Korea, and the EU in recognizing phosphate as a critical mineral, as it was recently added to their final 2025 list of critical minerals. How significant is that for the industry, and how does it raise the status of projects like yours, particularly related to this purified phosphoric acid?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, now that we're phosphate is on the critical minerals list of the U.S., it's on there for two reasons. One is for the fertilizer, the food security, but also for the battery. It's seen as a need for national security. So that what does that mean? We need sources of North American phosphate, but there aren't too many. The phosphate for fertilizer, sedimentary grade phosphate, is set to almost extinguish by late 2030s in North America, and that's a big problem. So new deposits coming online, such as ours in Saguenay, Lac Saint Jean, Quebec, igneous phosphate, is really well seen by the administration in the U.S. and in Canada and across the continent, because it is a source of security, right? Ours would be mostly for battery, which is there for defense and other industrial activities, but there's also a need for the food grade phosphate as well. So we're very short on both in North America right now.
And when it comes to use cases for LFP batteries, the main one is obviously electric vehicles. We've been seeing some different information come out when it comes to EV sales penetration. It's seen as below what was forecasted in the West, but in places like China, sales are booming on electric vehicles. Can you break down what you're seeing when it comes to the EV market internationally and how it could be evolving up ahead?
Yeah, so just that's one of the big misnomers around LFP battery, and everyone's always talking EVs. And yes, EVs have slowed down in North America, but when you look at LFP battery, EVs only constitute 7% of the uses of LFP battery. The other uses of LFP battery are, commercial transportation, small appliances and drones, scooters, skateboards, bicycles. But another big component is telecommunications, telecom towers. The largest component of all, which is about 60% of the uses of LFP battery, is stationary energy storage. Uh, also AI data centers is very important. Automation and robotics, all the things that the new administration in the U.S. is trying to onshore. So, you know, LFP battery is really not about EVs at all anymore. It's really about those big sectors such as energy storage, AI, and robotics. So, it really doesn't matter what happens to the EV sector. The EV sector, yes, is a little bit declining in North America and Europe and strong in China, but battery energy storage is just exploding all over the world. And that's exactly what we need LFP battery for.
That's very interesting. I was not aware that it only accounted for 7%, you said, is in the EV battery market when it comes to LFP batteries.
Correct. Yeah. It's just in the West, and the media has always been talking about EVs because they're sexy, and always been talking about nickel, manganese, cobalt batteries because they went into EVs. But really, the real story here is around energy storage and LFP battery. I mean, LFP batteries are now like 70 to 80% of all the batteries produced on the planet, and they go into everything, right? EVs is just a small component of what they do.
Well, let's discuss how First Phosphate fits into the picture. We've had you on a couple times before, but for those new and returning viewers, could you give us an overview of the company and some highlights on progress made since our last discussion, which was back in May?
Yeah, so I think our last discussion, Jesse, we've raised quite a bit of capital. We've raised about $25 million since then. We're going out on our last drilling program to fully define the resource at Beijing-La-Marche, which will give us, a big resource to then be able to make a decision whether to enter into our feasibility study, and then after that to be able to get into permitting, and after that to hopefully have a mine ready by 2029 to meet some of our definitive offtake agreements. So that's one of the really big things that has happened. Also, the government of Canada has put in $57 million into building a second wharf at the port of Saguenay, which is where we'll have our secondary transformation for phosphoric acid. It's right below our property, so that helps a lot. Port of Saguenay is really developing as a critical minerals hotspot in Quebec and for Canada. And the other thing is, if you see here, this is what we've done since we spoke to you in May. We've produced the world's first LFP batteries made of fully critical minerals from North America. So in this battery here, you have the phosphate and also the iron from our Beijing-La-Marche property in Quebec. You've got lithium carbonate from Nevada, from Century Lithium, and you've also got the anode material is graphite from the Nouveau Monde graphite project in Montreal. So we made the first LFP batteries in North America made of fully critical minerals of the USA and Canada. And these were the first batteries that were made in 25 years. Because as you know, LFP technology was first invented in North America. And then by about 2003, it was lost to China. And we haven't made them since. But these are the first batteries that were made in the 25 years. And the other interesting thing, Jesse, is these were cycled 2,000 times and they met full commercial tests, even though we only made 150 of them. So what does this mean? It means that, we definitely can onshore the LFP battery in North America. We've been able to get to this, from the critical minerals of North America. And we've been able to do it with all, commercial and environmentally friendly processes.
That's incredible. So I think that dovetails perfectly into what I want to talk about next, which is First Phosphate's LFP supply chain integration. You're not just looking to produce high purity phosphate concentrate upstream, you're also collaborating with partners on refinement and production of LFP cathode active material all the way to battery cells and packs and more. So walk us through how that process is set up and the key partners involved.
Yeah, so we see ourselves as a mining company, but also as a technology company. And I don't know, maybe at this point you could put on screen from our website the 6-step process that we use to get to the LFP battery, right? So first is we have to take the rock at Beijing-La-Marche and crush it, and we turn it into phosphate concentrate. Then phosphate concentrate is turned into phosphoric acid. That's with our partners Prayon in Belgium. And then after that, we mixed that with iron that was from our property and made with the process of from GK and Hoganis in Tennessee, the world's largest atomizer of steel powder. We make iron phosphate. Then the iron phosphate is added to the lithium that we got from Century Lithium from Nevada, and that made LFP cathode active material. And then from there, we added the anode material from Nouveau Monde Graphite, and we were able to make the world's first LFP batteries made from fully North American critical minerals.
That is really an amazing story and a microcosm for what is possible moving forward, particularly as we get into a situation geopolitically where we're seeing export restrictions on certain commodities. We're seeing a reduction or a desire to reduce reliance on countries such as China for these materials. Now, you mentioned earlier that you're looking to go into production fully in 2029. Could you walk us through what that timeline looks like to get there and the milestones you'll need to accomplish to make that a reality?
Yeah, good question, Jesse. So right now we're finishing up on our last bit of our exploration program. We've got 35,000 meters of drilling that we're doing, and that should fully define our resource, which we know is already existent through the PEA. So that should be done by April of this year. At that point, we make a decision whether to move into the feasibility study. If we do, that feasibility study will be prepared by the 2026. And then early 2027 is when we will get our permits. When we hope to be getting permitting by early to mid 2027. After that, there's a step of doing the engineering, and then hopefully to having a mine built and producing by mid 2029. Some of the other things in between the feasibility and the permitting, obviously, are bulk sample and metallurgy, which is ongoing right now, and then there's also the environmental aspect, environmental baseline studies, which we've already started on as well.
I want to circle back to the news you spoke about when you were giving the overview as well, and that is the Government of Canada recently announcing a second wharf at Port Saguenay. Here's a quote from the press release you put out. It says, "The second wharf at Port Saguenay is to be positioned directly adjacent to First Phosphate's planned phosphoric acid plant and will greatly assist in the transportation of the company's future phosphate concentrate, phosphoric acid, and lithium iron phosphate products to North American, European, and international destinations." Dive a little bit deeper into the significance of this development and how First Phosphate plans to capitalize on it.
Yeah, so the Port of Saguenay is already existing. It's got one wharf. We can clearly work with it, not a problem. But when there's a second wharf, it means more activity at the port, and it just helps us out as well, especially since that new wharf is going to be directly adjacent to our property. So it's a huge benefit to us, even though it's being built for multiple enterprises, not just for us, but it's a huge benefit for us. The federal government is looking to connect the Ring of Fire to the Port of Saguenay in order to be able to move critical minerals across Ontario and Quebec to then go to off-takers in Europe and anywhere else in the world. So it's going to be a really vital hub. And the fact that we got the best spot at the port is really important to us. It's a really great strategic location that, at this point, money can't buy, and it's locked up, and it's like location. Once you got it, you got it.
And can you walk us through your relationship with the government in Quebec, the support you've gotten from them for the project, and perhaps any infrastructure you have in place, anything else that's important to touch on when it comes to the project?
Yeah, so I mean, we have a very good relationship with all the local municipalities, the supplier guilds, chambers of commerce, our local Indigenous group that's a collaborator, and also with the Quebec government. There's a lot of back and forth, obviously, with all of these groups, Quebec government and even federal government as we're moving through the project. Quebec government, has issued a letter of interest. They're interested in being involved in the project as we advance and as we get past our feasibility stage. So that'll be very helpful when it comes to building out the mine and the phosphoric acid plant here in a couple of years.
And when it comes to purified phosphoric acid, obviously there's not an abundance of it coming online within North America anytime soon. Can you talk about that, how the supply chain is currently set up globally for purified phosphoric acid? It's a bit of a tongue twister.
Yeah.
And then how First Phosphate is positioned to capitalize, being one of the few sources of this commodity to be able to bring it online.
Yeah, so purified phosphoric acid, at least in the West, there's only 5 companies that make it. There's only 2 in North America. Like I said, but pretty much at capacity with existing uses. But when LFP starts to take off, especially locally made LFP from local LFP cathode active materials, it's going to be really important to have a local source, to have a lot of it. The good thing about our rock is that our phosphate concentrate, 100% of it almost turns in directly into purified phosphoric acid because of the purity. The other producers don't have that availability because they're using sedimentary rock and they're using it mostly to make fertilizer-based acids, which are lower in quality. We should be one of the first to have the goods for LFP battery. So it puts us in a really quite pleasant position here for the future.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the company's cash position. You recently closed an oversubscribed private placement and a follow-on tranche. How much capital did you raise? How much cash in total is on the balance sheet, and how much runway does that give you?
Yeah, I mean, we've raised about 25 million, I believe, in the last 6 to 8 months. We've probably got around 20 million on the balance sheet at this moment, and that gives us a runway through to the end of 2026, early 2027. Gets us through our entire feasibility study and into our permitting, which will be in 2027. So it gives us about a good 18 months of capital, if not longer.
So when it comes to putting the feasibility study out, what is the timeline on that, and where are you at in that process? Have you initiated it yet?
We haven't initiated the feasibility study yet. What usually happens in mining is you have to define your resource and then you make a decision based on that resource, whether you proceed the feasibility study or not. So like I said, we're doing our 35,000 meters of final drilling to really define our resource. And then after that is done, we've got the full economic model for the property, and a decision will be made to proceed into feasibility at that point. And then when you start the feasibility, usually can take 6 to 9 months to complete. So we would hope to have that completed by end of 2026, latest early 2027.
Great. So we've discussed a lot of different potential catalysts, but for yourself, what comes to mind the most when it comes to First Phosphate shareholders, news flow, catalysts upcoming for the company? What should people be looking forward to?
Well, I think people could continue to look to what they've seen in the past. It's a very flexible, fast-moving company. We communicate often. We communicate well. I hope. We move as quickly as we can, and we just continue to develop. Like we're sprinting towards a mine. We'd like to, get through everything and make all our decisions to move forward with their feasibility study here as soon as possible. It's just a matter of going through the steps as quickly as we can. We're well capitalized to do it, and just keep watching us.
So before I let you go, is there anything we haven't yet covered or anything you think it's important to emphasize that potential shareholders of First Phosphate should be focused on?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jesse. So like I said before, right, it's all about LFP for energy storage and data centers. And there's, you can't have LFP without the P. There's about 200, different companies out there that investors can make a choice of and traded on, public markets all around the globe in lithium. But there isn't too many in phosphate. And as far as I know, there's only, one company like us that's fully focused on, phosphate, high purity phosphate, but just for the LFP battery industry and just with no tangents at all, just focused on electrification. So, if you'd like to give us a look and see what's out there, I think you'll come up with the same conclusion that First Phosphate is probably one of the best companies positioned out there to meet the oncoming demand of phosphate for LFP battery.
Well, I'm going to put a link in the description below to the company website and social media so people can follow along with First Phosphate. John, once again, thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been a blast.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. Always appreciated.
Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.